Welcome to another deep dive. This time, it's all about systems thinking.
Systems thinking.
Yeah, that's right. It's basically how to understand the world. Not just A plus B equals C, but like the whole picture, you know?
Right. All the moving parts, how everything's connected.
Exactly. And we've got this awesome lecture. Like, it's like a crash course on systems thinking just for us.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So imagine, those really tough problems at work or just in your life in general.
Mm-hmm.
Systems thinking can actually help us, like, crack those problems wide open.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I'm not totally sure I get it.
Yeah.
What exactly is systems thinking?
Well, it all starts with understanding that, like, everything's a system.
Okay, so like, what do you mean everything?
Like, literally everything.
Yeah.
Your job, the environment,
Except for
even.
traffic.
Traffic, yes.
Okay, so those are all systems. But why should I care?
Because once you understand how these systems, like, work, you can make way better decisions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I still feel like I need, like, a working definition.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is a system?
Right. Well, I mean, how would you define a system?
I guess I'd say it's like a bunch of different parts that all work together
Yeah, that's it.
to do something, achieve some kind of goal.
Exactly. Like, take that traffic example.
Okay, yeah,
The roads, the cars, the lights, the weather, it's all connected.
it is. And it never seems to be working right.
Right. But, like, with systems thinking, you don't just complain about traffic.
Right.
You can actually start to see those patterns, see how it all works, like, as a whole.
And then what? What do you do once you see those patterns?
Well, then you can start to understand those loops, you know?
Loops.
Yeah, feedback loops, like how one change can cause another change.
Okay, I think I get it. Like a domino effect, right?
Sort of, but it can go both ways.
Both ways.
Yeah, so there's positive feedback loops,
Okay.
and there's negative feedback loops.
Okay. So what's the difference?
Well, positive feedback loops are like, they're like that snowball effect.
Oh, right, okay.
Change just leads to more and more change, like something going viral online.
Yeah, okay, I get that.
But then negative feedback loops,
Yeah.
those are all about balance. Think of like a thermostat.
Oh, right.
It keeps your house at the right temperature.
By, like, counteracting the changes. If it gets too hot, it cools things down. And if it gets too cold, it heats things up.
Exactly. It's about keeping things stable.
Interesting. So we've got systems everywhere, and these systems are full of feedback loops that are either amplifying things or balancing things out.
That's it. So how does that help us with, like, real-life problems?
Well, let's go back to your traffic woes.
Oh, please, no, not traffic again.
But that's a perfect example. Once you understand those feedback loops in the traffic system,
Yeah.
you can actually start to anticipate, like, problems before they even happen
Yeah.
and make better decisions about your commute.
So, like, if I know there's construction on a certain road,
You can already guess that it's going to cause delays on your usual route and maybe find a different way to go.
wow, that's actually super helpful. I can see how this applies to way more than just traffic. So are you saying our normal way of thinking about problems, like just cause and effect, isn't good enough?
For simple things, maybe, but the world's pretty complicated, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So when things get really complex, that simple way of thinking doesn't always work. It doesn't account for all those connections and, well, the consequences.
You mean like unintended consequences?
Exactly. Sometimes you try to fix one thing, but it ends up messing something else up.
Oof, I've been there. So what you're saying is we need to think bigger. Think about all the different pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine a city trying to go green, reduce their carbon footprint.
Okay.
So they decide to focus on electric cars. Seems logical, right?
Yeah, totally. Electric cars, good for the planet.
But what if the electricity is still coming from, like, coal-fired power plants?
Uh-oh. Not so good for the planet anymore.
Right. They might be reducing emissions from cars, but they're just shifting the problem somewhere else.
It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet while ignoring a burst pipe, right?
Exactly. And that's where systems thinking comes in. It helps us look beyond the obvious.
Okay, I'm starting to see the power of this. But how do we actually do systems thinking? Are there, like, tools or techniques we can use?
Oh, yeah. There are some really cool tools, like using a map to explore new territory. We'll dive into those in a bit. But first, want to try spotting some of those feedback loops in your own life?
I'm game. Let's see.
Okay, let's start with your daily routine. What does that look like?
So those feedback loops, huh? I gotta say, once you start seeing them, they're, like, everywhere.
Right. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It is, but also a little overwhelming, to be honest.
I get that. It's like, you can't unsee it once you see it.
Exactly. But hey, I'm ready to keep exploring. You mentioned some, like, tools for systems thinking.
Oh yeah, the tools, they're really helpful.
Yeah, I'm really curious about those. Like, how do we actually visualize these systems?
Okay, so first up, we've got causal loop
Oh,
diagrams.
those are loop diagrams.
Yeah. Think of it like a map.
On the map.
Yeah, but instead of showing streets and stuff, it shows you how all the different parts of a system connect and how they, like, affect each other.
So instead of just thinking A causes B, I can see the whole, like, web of connections.
Exactly. You start to see those feedback loops in action. Positive ones, negative ones, the whole shebang.
Okay, I like it. Visualizing those loops. Give me an example. How would I use this in, like, real life?
Sure. Let's say you're trying to get in shape.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Always trying to get in shape.
So you can make a causal loop diagram for that.
Okay, so how would that work?
Well, you'd map out all the different factors, right?
Yeah.
Diet, exercise, sleep, even stress levels.
Okay, yeah, those are all connected.
Right. And you can see how they all influence each other. Like if you exercise more, you might have more energy. So you exercise even more.
Ah, a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. But then maybe stress leads to bad sleep, and that makes you less motivated to exercise.
Negative feedback loop.
Yep. So the causal loop diagram helps you see all those connections
Yeah.
and those loops. And then you can start to figure out, like, how to make things better.
That's awesome. Okay, what other tools are in the systems thinker's toolbox?
Well, there's also the stock and flow diagram.
Stock and flow. Sounds kind of financial.
It can be. Like, think about a business tracking its inventory, right?
Yeah.
They need to see how much stuff they have, how much they're selling, and how much they need to order.
Right, to make sure they don't run out.
Exactly. So a stock and flow diagram helps you visualize how things change over time. The stock is what you have, and the flow is how it's changing.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. So could I use this for my personal finances too?
Totally. You can map out your income, your spending, your savings, and investments.
See how it all flows.
Exactly. And make smarter decisions about, reaching your financial goals.
This is so cool. I never thought about personal finance as a system before.
Well, it is. And once you start seeing these systems, you can start managing them better. Speaking of common patterns, there's another powerful tool. System archetypes.
System what now?
Archetypes. They're basically these recurring patterns of behavior that pop up in different systems over and over.
Interesting. So like universal themes and stories, the hero's journey, or like the villain's downfall.
Exactly. They're like classic storylines, but for systems.
Yeah.
And recognizing these archetypes can be super helpful.
How so?
Well, one classic archetype is called shifting the burden. It's basically when you try to fix a problem in the short term, but you end up making the problem worse in the long term.
Uh-oh. Give me an example.
Okay, think about like relying on painkillers for chronic back pain. You're relieving the pain, but you're not addressing the underlying issue.
Right. You might be masking the real problem.
Exactly. Or constantly putting out fires at work instead of looking at the systemic problems that are causing them in the first place.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely been there. Too many fires, not enough fire prevention.
Exactly. So by recognizing these archetypes, we can avoid those traps and make better decisions.
This is all starting to click, but I gotta ask, is this something anyone can do? Or do you need a PhD in, like, complexity theory to wrap your head around it?
Nope. Anyone can do it. It's not about being a genius. It's about being curious and wanting to see the world in a new way.
So where do we start? What are some, like, baby steps to becoming better systems thinkers?
Well, I'd say the first step is just to cultivate a sense of curiosity.
Curiosity.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
start paying attention to the connections around you. Don't just accept things at face value. Ask why and how questions.
So instead of just complaining about my long commute, I could start thinking about all the things that cause it
Yeah.
and how they're connected.
Exactly. You're already thinking like a systems thinker.
Cool. What else?
Try looking at things from different perspectives.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Get out of my own bubble.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to question your assumptions. What we think we know can sometimes be a barrier to seeing the bigger picture.
So it's like being open to new information
Yeah.
and challenging my own beliefs.
Absolutely. That's how we grow, right?
Yeah.
As individuals and as systems thinkers.
This is awesome. I'm feeling inspired. But I also have to ask, can this really help us tackle the big problems like climate change, inequality, all that stuff?
It's not a magic bullet, but it's definitely a powerful tool. Like with climate change, for example, it's not just about reducing emissions. It's about seeing how everything's connected. Deforestation, food production, population growth, economic incentives.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge interconnected mess.
It is. But that's why we need systems thinkers, people who can see the whole picture and make decisions that benefit the whole system, not just one part of it.
It makes me think about those like inspirational quotes about, thinking globally, acting locally.
Exactly. And even if you're not in a position of power, you can still apply systems thinking in your own life. Be a conscious consumer, a thoughtful citizen, a problem solver in your own community.
I love that. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play. But it's also a little daunting. The world is so complex. Where do we even begin?
You start small,
Yeah.
in your own life, in your own sphere of influence.
So like those little changes we make, they can actually make a difference.
Absolutely. Think about it. If you start applying systems thinking in your own life, you might inspire others to do the same. And those ripples can spread far and wide.
Wow, I like that. Creating a ripple effect of positive change.
Exactly. And speaking of examples, there are actually a ton of ways that systems thinking is already being used to make a difference in the world.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, some companies are using it to design more sustainable supply chains, reduce waste, all that good stuff.
So like being good for the planet and good for business?
Exactly. And then there's healthcare, which is using systems thinking to improve patient care and reduce errors.
How does that work?
Well, they might analyze patient flow, identify bottlenecks, and streamline processes. Make sure patients are getting the care they need when they need it.
Makes sense. So it's all about seeing those connections and optimizing the flow of things.
Exactly. And the more we understand those connections, the better we can design systems that are, resilient and adaptable to change.
Speaking of change, how does systems thinking help us deal with, like, the constant changes happening in the world?
That's a great question. One of the key things about systems thinking is that it recognizes that systems are dynamic. They're always in flux, always responding to pressures. So instead of trying to, control every outcome, we need to learn to embrace uncertainty.
Embrace uncertainty. That sounds kind of scary.
I know, right? But think about it this way. A tree that can bend in the wind is more likely to survive a storm than a tree that's stiff and unyielding.
Okay, that's a good point. I'd rather be the flexible tree.
Me too. And it applies to our systems too. They need to be flexible and adaptable, just like that tree.
So it's not about being rigid and controlling. It's about being, like, flexible and responsive.
Exactly. And that's tough, right? Because we like to feel in control.
We do. But it seems like sometimes letting go of control is actually the best way to create positive change.
Exactly.
This has been so eye-opening, but I have to ask, are there any, downsides to systems thinking? Any pitfalls we should watch out for?
That's a great question. And yeah, there are a few things to be mindful of. One of the biggest pitfalls is getting lost in the complexity.
Lost in the complexity? What do you mean?
Well, it's easy to get bogged down in all the details and connections, and then you just feel overwhelmed and stuck, like analysis paralysis.
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling. Too much information, too many options.
Exactly. So remember, systems thinking is a tool. It's not supposed to paralyze you. It's supposed to help you.
So how do we avoid that trap?
Focus on what's actionable. Start small. Identify the key leverage points, the places where small changes can make a big difference. Don't try to solve everything at once.
One step at a time, right?
Exactly. And don't forget about the human factor.
Oh, right. People.
People. They can be unpredictable.
Definitely not always rational.
Right. So systems thinking has to take that into account. It's not just about, data and diagrams. It's about understanding human behavior, too.
Motivations, beliefs, all that stuff.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating. Because human behavior is complex, but it's also what makes systems so dynamic and adaptable.
I'm starting to see how systems thinking can help us understand not just the world around us, but also ourselves.
Exactly. It's a journey of self-discovery as well as a way to understand the world.
Wow, I love that. Okay, so let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, I want to learn more. Where should they start?
Well, there are a ton of great resources out there, but if I had to recommend just one book, it would be Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows.
I've heard of that one. Is it, beginner friendly?
Oh, totally. Meadows was a brilliant systems thinker, but she was also a great writer. She explains complex ideas in a really clear and engaging way.
Awesome. I'm adding it to my reading list. Anything else?
Just remember, reading about systems thinking is just the first step. The real magic happens when you start applying it in your own life. Making better choices, creating positive change, all that good stuff.
So it's not just about, head knowledge. It's about actually doing something with it.
Exactly. It's a way of being in the world.
This has been such a great deep dive. I feel like my brain is buzzing with new ideas.
That's the power of systems thinking. It opens up new perspectives and possibilities.
And it gives us the power to create change, not just for ourselves, but for the whole system.
Absolutely. Remember, even small changes can have big ripple effects.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought. Think about a system in your own life work, community, family, whatever, and ask yourself, what are the key leverage points in this system? Where can I make a small change that could have a big impact?
What a great question. It's a reminder that we all have the power to be change agents.
Exactly. So go out there, embrace the complexity, and start thinking in systems. You might be surprised by the amazing things that can happen. It's pretty amazing, right, how this all connects.
It is. And you know what? It's not just about these big, huge systems either.
What do you mean?
I mean, systems thinking, it works on a personal level, too.
Oh, yeah. Like our own lives are systems.
Exactly. Think about, like, how you manage your time or your energy, even your relationships.
Right. All systems.
All systems. And once you start seeing them that way, you can make way better choices.
I'm already, like, thinking about my daily routine differently now, trying to spot those leverage points,
I love that. That's what it's all about. Awareness.
Okay, so I gotta ask, what's, like, one small change you've made in your own life based on systems thinking?
Let me think. I guess for me, it was all about understanding my energy levels, like how they change throughout the day.
Oh, yeah. Energy levels, that's a big one.
Right. I used to try to just power through everything, even when I was exhausted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know that feeling. Like, I can push through this.
Exactly. But what I realized was I was actually creating a negative feedback loop.
A negative feedback loop. How so?
Well, I was getting less productive, more stressed, and the quality of my work was suffering.
Ouch. Not good.
Not good at all. So I had to change something.
What did you do?
I started paying attention to my body, like actually listening to when I had energy and when I didn't.
Okay.
And then I started planning my day around that. So I do my most important stuff when I have the most energy.
And what about when you're feeling drained?
I take breaks, short breaks throughout the day just to recharge.
So simple. But I bet it makes a huge difference.
It really does. I'm more productive, less stressed, and I actually enjoy my work more.
That's fantastic. It's a good reminder that systems thinking isn't just about these big, overwhelming problems, right?
Right.
It's also about, like, improving our own lives.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about being part of a system, but also taking care of ourselves within that system.
This has been such a great deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you said earlier about systems thinking being a journey. What does that, like, actually look like for someone who's just starting out?
Well, it starts with cultivating that mindset. Being curious, noticing connections, asking questions.
Like, we're all little scientists.
Exactly. Observing the world, trying to figure out how it works. And as you get more comfortable, you can start exploring those tools we talked about, the diagrams, the archetypes.
Right. We'll be sure to put some resources in the show notes for everyone.
Perfect. And remember, learning about systems thinking is just the beginning. The real fun starts when you actually put it into practice.
So make better choices, create positive change, all that good stuff.
Exactly.
Well, this has been amazing. I feel like my brain is, like, bursting with new ideas.
And that's the power of systems thinking. It's all about new perspectives, new possibilities.
And, like, realizing we can actually make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Every little change matters. Remember those ripple effects.
Right. So before we sign off, one last thought for our listeners. Think about a system you want to change, big or small, and ask yourself, where's the leverage point? What small change can you make that could have a big impact?
Such a great question. It reminds us that we all have the power to make change happen.
Exactly. So embrace that complexity, get out there, and start thinking in systems. You might be amazed at what you can achieve. Until next time.